Hey, this is Doug.
And Shay Taylor.
And welcome to session 1 of the Total Marriage Makeover.
Welcome.
Today's session is going to unpack the principles and the dynamics of creating a healthy communication culture in your relationship. You know, I believe when couples can create effective communication, they can conquer anything. So I think the first key is to develop a working definition of what we consider healthy communication. Communication is an exchange of thoughts, ideals, and perspectives that result in agreement of, or at least appreciation of, varying positions. And I think that's a dynamic that many people don't factor in when it comes to communication. The goal is not always, the optimal goal is agreement. We believe the same thing.
Right.
I believe it should be blue. You believe it should be blue. But if we can't get to the place of agreement, we should at least get to the place of appreciation, of understanding that I think it should be blue. You think it should be red. Right. I'll respect your red, even though blue is my personal preference.
Absolutely. And because communication is an exchange, then all communication is affected by the emotional, the social, the psychological, and the spiritual maturity and well-being of both parties or all parties involved. So we're going to talk about today, starting off, some hindrances to communication. Number one is time. Effective communication has to be scheduled and be respectful of other people's schedules. And so it's really important to find the right time, the right, like we said, you can't do, if you're watching the Laker game, you know, that's not a good time. We don't want to walk out when, or try to talk when you have to go to work, or when I'm trying to go to work. You want to make sure that you have the right time. You're not walking out on each other. You're not, because the person will feel disrespected.
Yes.
You know, even though you do have to go to work, they know you have to go to work, but in their minds, he doesn't have time. Right. He doesn't have time to sit down and discuss what's going on with us. Mm-hmm. And number two, talking. Learn to listen and not wait for an entryway to comment. That's me. I want to go ahead and get my point across. I like to get my point across because I want to go ahead and get past it and do what we need to do. Mm-hmm. So that's a very important, that's one of the hindrances to communication, is learn to listen and not wait for an entryway to comment. And how many people really do that? How many people really just listen? You hear, but do you really listen? Right. And then temper. Angry people aren't effective communicators. Right. When you yell at me, because again, like I talked about before, I'm an only child and I don't like a lot of drama. You know, I'm used to having my little space. Mm-hmm. And so when you start yelling at me or it just seems like a lot of drama, I shut down. I don't want to be a part of it. And then it's just kind of disrespectful, I think, you know, when you're yelling and screaming at a person. People can't hear you when you communicate that way.
Very good. I agree. I think temper is a huge element because whenever a person feels attacked, they're going to respond in one of two dynamics. They're going to get on the defensive, meaning they're going to close up, they're going to clam up, and so I shut all communication down, or I'm going to get on the offense. I'm going to attack back. Right. You know, I'm going to try to respond, and so now it's a shouting match. It's whoever's loudest, and now we begin to get rude. We begin to get vindictive, but that's not communication. That's really a destructive relationship. That's a toxic relationship.
It's very toxic.
You know, I also think that there's a dynamic. One of the hindrances to effective communication is really training. Right. You know, many of us, we were not trained to be effective communicators. Right. We were trained to talk, but we were not necessarily trained to communicate. We were trained, say bottle, say mama, and get your point across, but we weren't necessarily trained to create a relationship where I can express and you can express to me. Right. So yeah, I think that's key. Weren't always taught to be considerate to those people that was even closest to us.
And we said train. You know, we have been trained, just trained wrong sometimes.
We've been trained
or not trained properly.
Yes. Time becomes a hindrance to communication. Talking, as you said, temper is a huge hindrance to communication and training. And the fifth is tone. That kind of goes back to the temper dynamic. That goes back to training that we don't always realize. Tone of voice can cancel communication.
Absolutely.
And it's not necessarily what I say, but how I say it. Sometimes my tone, my attitude, even my nonverbal communication skills, how I fold my hands, or my posture can begin to take away from the element of having healthy communication. These things that we have to be conscious of. You talked about it earlier. All of this hinges on the personal maturity of all those involved.
Absolutely.
And so I've got to grow, I've got to develop, I've got to study myself so that I can improve as a communicator.
Absolutely. And so we're talking about the hindrances to communication, but let's talk about how to communicate. What are some tips that we can use to communicate? We call these the 7 golden rules of communication.
7 golden rules of communication.
7 golden rules of communication. It's not all about you. You can't take what a person says personally. And again, I like to, think about it like this. I can disagree with your idea. That doesn't mean I disagree with you. Or I may not like your idea or your way of doing something, but that doesn't mean I don't like you.
Right.
And so it's hard sometimes for us to separate the two. Sometimes we don't understand the differences, and so that makes the relationship hard.
Right.
And then we have, don't treat an assumption as a fact. I know that's probably a really big one for a lot of people, because I know I can go all the way down the road. I can start with one piece of information, and I have completely, planned out and thought about the whole scenario in my head. And it's nothing like that. And so sometimes we have to make sure that just because we think something is happening, that may not be the fact, or that may not be the truth about the situation. And then that's where the communication comes in. It's asking. And talking and listening and truly hearing what a person is saying, so that you can say, you may say, well, you said you didn't like my dinner and you didn't like my food. And you're like, no, I just didn't want to eat. I didn't feel well. And it's like, no, you didn't like my food. So we got to make sure we do that. And then be clear when you ask for something. Don't assume that people know what you're asking for.
It's very good.
Be very clear in what, I talk about how with, an example of, if I say the washing machine is going too slow, or I can't wash my clothes because the washing machine is doing something, then you go buy a washing machine. Well, I didn't necessarily want a washing machine. Right. So, so we got to make sure that we're clear on that.
Very good. That's good.
And then focus on what you want and not necessarily what you don't want. And you gave the example, which is always a great example of, if you're in the store and you say you like this shirt, no, I don't like that shirt. I don't like that shirt. I don't like that shirt. Or I don't want to eat there. I don't like that kind of food. Well, tell me what exactly what it is that you want.
Very good. I agree. Because when we start pointing out what we don't want, we never get to what we do want. And how much time can we save if we can express, I want this, or this what I like you to do, or and not be so ambiguous. Well, I don't feel loved. Okay,
so
I don't feel that I get enough attention. I don't feel connected. Okay, don't tell me what you don't want. Tell me what you want.
Right.
I want to spend more time together. That I can do.
Right.
But when you just tell me what I don't want, that's so vague. And then a person can spend their time chasing different ideas, when it will be so much more effective to say, this is what I want. Absolutely. I think a great rule for healthy communication is making we statements.
Absolutely.
We statements. We have to move away from the I and you statements. You always do this, or you never do this, and or I always do this, and no. It's we haven't spent enough time together.
Right.
As opposed to you are overlooking me, you leaving me. No, we should spend more time together. We should have to work on our budget. We have to save more money.
Right.
Because I don't want to become superior.
Right.
I don't want to be degrading, and I don't want to isolate myself from this relationship as if I'm on my own team.
Right.
Number six, I think we have to be willing to learn ourselves.
That's good.
Be willing to learn ourselves.
That's a big one.
When we understand that neither one of us come into this relationship perfect.
Right.
Neither one of us come into this relationship all knowing.
Right.
And I'm always learning myself. I believe we should be high self-monitor so that I can learn my tendencies, learn my traits, learn the things that are a threat to me, the things that my triggers.
Right.
I have to understand and recognize that there are certain times or certain topics that I'm more sensitive about, and I may not be as open-minded when it comes to those kind of things.
Right.
And so again, this is where the maturity comes in, and where I think it's so great that you're taking the time to invest your resources and your time into this kind of into this space, so that you can lean in and not only see your spouse, but see yourself. This is the hard work that so many people don't do. They will criticize the marriage, or they'll shut down on the marriage, and never take the time to say, how can I grow as a person? What areas am I bringing to the table that are hindering us? And so you guys are doing such a great job of making this investment of time and resources and yourselves to dig deeper, and you're on your way to, again, a total makeover of your marriage.
Total marriage makeover. And then can I say this about learning yourself? I think one of the biggest pieces too is learn yourself and then accept what you find, what you find out. Because a lot of times we address things, and we hear things, and people will, give us things concerning ourselves, but we don't really believe that's who we are.
Right.
We have to really, really do self-assessments and truly believe that's who we are.
I've been saying for years that neither one of us are ever smart enough or skilled enough to see our own backside.
Right.
And this is when I have to trust my spouse that they have my best interest at heart, and they can see things about me that either I can't see or I'm not willing to accept.
Absolutely.
Just a couple of days ago, you and I and Miles were out shopping, and we both stopped at different times because there was a stain on the back of his shirt. And you stopped and say, hey, there's a stain, and he's looking, and 5 minutes later, I didn't know your conversation. I said, hey, Miles, there's something on the back of his shirt. And he's like, Mom already told me. Well, he had to trust that we could see something he couldn't see, and we wouldn't lie to him.
And we wouldn't lie to him. That's the key. That's the key. I think, and when you say that we wouldn't lie, I think we don't give, sometimes in marriage, we don't give each other the benefit of the doubt. We don't believe that I have, my spouse has my best interest at heart. And for some apparent reason, we go immediately, before we do anything else, we go immediately into fight mode.
Right.
Not that, okay, well, my spouse really has my best interest at heart. He wouldn't try to do this to intentionally hurt me. So if something happened, it was not intentional. Now, not that it didn't hurt me.
Right.
But it wasn't intentional.
Absolutely.
Now, some things are intentional. I do get that. But sometimes I think we need to really look at the fact of where we are with our spouse and the trust factor.
I agree. One great tool is to listen. I have to choose to listen to my spouse. The key to effective communication, as you said, be willing to listen, because I don't know it all, and understand that hearing and listening are two different things.
Two very different
Hearing
things.
and listening are two different things. Many times we think that we're listening, where we're really just pausing. We're waiting for you to pause and take a breath, so we can give our opinion. That's the wonderful element that you incorporated into our marriage years ago was the principle of parrot talking. And I'll admit, early on, it was frustrating because I thought I was being tested. So did you hear what I said, or are we? Did I communicate properly, or did you really hear this? And I'm grown. I heard this, but as I developed, I understood that we were trying to make sure that we were both on the same page, and I heard you, and I really listened, and didn't just hear.
Because that keeps the parrot talking, keeps us from having some wrecks and crashes that we don't have to have.
Absolutely. So. And that goes on to the concept of how to become a good listener, because again, we were taught to talk, but we were not all taught to listen.
Right.
One of the ways I think that we develop as being great listeners is maintaining eye contact. Maintaining eye contact is great. I'm making eye contact. Maintaining eye contact is great. It shows a level of respect for the person speaking.
Absolutely.
It gives the perspective of attention. And I know that I'm not chasing and I'm not battling for other for your attention at that time because you focused in on me.
Right.
Number two, I think what we do is minimize external distractions, which is great. In order to be a good listener, I have to minimize external distractions. You brought up the area of the scenario of maybe the Laker game is on. So what I want to do is pause the television and the time factor. If we have small children, early in the morning or getting kids dressed or when they're running around may not be the time to have a serious conversation. So we may need to go back to the time factor of scheduling 7 o'clock tonight. Let's set time to sit down and talk when the kids are in bed or when I don't have all these other distractions. But I also have to be willing to pause the television, turn off the radio,
it off.
Turn it off,
so you won't be tempted to see
exactly
what's going on.
Exactly. These are simple things that we have to be willing to do to be good listeners, because there's a responsibility on me to hear properly, just as there's a responsibility on you to speak properly.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's the big thing, is a lot of times people don't realize, that they heard it wrong, or they just didn't hear it the right way. And a lot of times we hear based off of our environment, how we grew up, the way we think. So when we hear somebody say something that trigger something that's from our past, then we immediately correlate those two and say, okay, he's saying the same thing. He's just like my dad. He's just like my ex-husband. He's just like the guy I dated, And so that's not fair to the person. So, okay. So how do we still continue with how to be a good listener? So we said maintain eye contact, minimize external distractions, focus on what the speaker is saying.
Very good. Making
sure that we listen and truly focus in. And I talk about, and I know Pastor and I, we did this years ago, early on in marriage, where we would even bring in a notebook and we would take little notes. And it's okay. Just just make sure that you get that established up front, so the person won't think, oh, I'm talking and they're writing. But sometimes you want to give your spouse the opportunity to say what they need to say without interrupting them. It's sometimes you may forget what you want to say or what you want to address. Go back and make some little notes, and then at the end of that conversation, come back and say, okay, so you said right here that we're not spending enough time together. What do you mean? Because I feel like we're always together. Well, do you mean time without the kids? Because we're always somewhere with the kids. We're at football games and we're at all these different things. So we need to make sure that we focus in on what the person is saying, and then keep an open mind. Don't lock your mind up, and don't go into the situation or the conversation already knowing what, or already having what you're going to say, or already having how it's going to work out in your head.
This is something that we had to learn, and what I love about these sessions are we teach practical tips. And we also share things that we've incorporated in our own marriage. I never forget that fateful lunch that we had. I surprised Shay with the lunch and said we needed.
You have to preface it and let them know how much I love luncheon to eat.
And she loves luncheon. So we were sitting at lunch, and after the appetizer, I pull out some spreadsheets and brought some documents, and I go into a business meeting, and she's like, what in the heck are you doing? and I literally
was off guard.
And I couldn't realize why I had this brilliant plan for our business and for our finances, and I could not understand why she was so frustrated, why she just shut down. And she expressed to me, I didn't plan on having a business meeting. I thought we were coming to lunch. And now what happens is, she said, I'm off balance because I never know if we're going to have lunch or if this is going to be a business meeting. And so what we can many times do is we can begin to preface or already assume what the person's going to do. So whenever we sit down, if I associate these business meetings with lunch, every lunch you're waiting on the business meeting. You never get to rest.
You never enjoy it
because you're waiting on that punch. And so that goes back to scheduling time, allocating time for certain conversations, but also keeping an open mind and say, okay, this may not be another meeting.
Right.
Because you already have your guard up and you're not open to the lunch and you never enjoy your soup, never enjoy your pasta because before long, here come those doggone spreadsheets.
Right. And, and then I think one of the things that we did that to help alleviate some of that frustration is by putting things on the calendar and saying we put a lunch date on the calendar for every 2 weeks and it says no business.
Yes.
So that, so then we know if we have a lunch business, we have a date on the calendar that says, business ideas and talk over whatever we want to talk over. So then I know what I'm going into.
Right.
So I love that. Keep an open mind and ask the speaker to reiterate points or reword if unclear. Again, that goes back to the having the little notebook. And it's okay to just say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm clear. Now, there's a big difference when you say, I just want to make sure that I'm clear, or, again, tone. What you say now, what?
Right.
Why you say that? Okay. It's a big difference.
Right.
And people immediately get defensive. And I always, and I talk about a lot, is just wanting, you want your relationship and your conversations with your spouse to be a safe place.
Yes.
You want to be able to come to your spouse, to talk to them without feeling attacked.
Right.
You get attacked in the world, you fight the world, you do, all the things. And when you get home, that's your safe space, and it should be your safe space.
Very good.
And so we want to make sure we keep that, ask the speaker to reiterate points or reword if unclear. And even if the speaker is launching a complaint against you, wait until they're finished. I know that's so hard. That is so hard. Mm-hmm. But it will, because a lot of times when someone says something, give them a little time to talk about it, because it really may not be what you think it is. Right. And it really may be going in a different direction than what you think, than the way you think it's going. So make sure we do that.
Very good. I think another key is to clearly define the problem. Many times we don't articulate what the real issue is, and we can chase rabbit trails, and as opposed to expressing that I just feel distant, or I don't feel loved, or I don't feel appreciated. No, just let's clearly define the problem. I don't think we spend enough time together.
Exactly.
Or I don't feel that that we're giving each other the proper priority.
Right.
And so clearly define what the problem is, so that we can solve that particular problem. I also think it's key to not argue about details.
Right.
Many times we get off track because your statement may be, well, you're 15 minutes late. Well, I'm only 10 minutes late. Well, late is late.
Late is late.
Late is late, and it is.
Then it becomes nitpicky.
It becomes nitpicky and disrespectful, because we can only progress to the degree that we're willing to acknowledge our own flaws.
Right. Absolutely.
I tell a story many times about the two privates in the Naval Academy, and two privates there, and one was being released, and a guy comes. He says, "Well, why is this young man being discharged?" He says, "Well, he went to sleep on his post." And he says, "So you're going to discharge this guy simply because he went to sleep on his post?" And the sergeant says, "No." He says, "That gentleman went to sleep on his post as well." He says, "But when we addressed it and we confronted him about going to sleep on his post, he acknowledged that you're correct. We reprimanded him, but he's back on his post."
Right.
The second gentleman, when we approached him about going to sleep on the post, he denied it until we pulled the footage back. Once he saw the camera, he admitted that he fell asleep. He said, "But we can't trust him now.
Right.
And I don't want to go to war with somebody who will not be honest."
Who will not be honest.
I can handle disappointments, but I cannot handle deception. And so you always want to keep the level of honesty in your relationship, that you can accept your flaws, accept responsibility, because we can move forward from disappointments.
Right.
It's hard to move forward from deception.
I totally agree, because when a person is honest, when they admit what they did, that literally gives you, now, not to say that you still won't be upset or hurt about it, but that gives you the opportunity to feel like, okay, we can move forward.
Right.
Because we've addressed it. If you never address it or never admit it, I don't really know where to go with that.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's good. I love it.
Great point is discussing one thing at a time. So we don't want to take a shotgun effect at our issues.
Yeah, right.
We want to focus and decide our current issue is our finances. Let's work on getting our finances together, and let's put a plan together so we don't go into finances and you never spend time and your mother does this and you're all over the place and you can never rectify any particular issue. And one of the things that I found is many times there's certain areas that bleed over into others. And if we can resolve one particular area, many times it can eliminate some other issues just by adding structure to that. So we want to focus on one thing at a time, tackle that before we go to other things. And that's why we want to make this a part of our lives, because it may take more than one setting or more than one time together to map out every element. We want to start using these principles, and that's why I love these dynamics so much, because these are timeless principles. Making eye contact is timeless. Being honest and responsible is timeless, and so we can use these same principles across the board as we develop, because we're always evolving. We have different issues in our marriage as our children have gotten older, as we've had businesses to come into our lives, and even as we've experienced changes in priorities as we've gotten older. If we use the same principles that are timeless, we can always keep a steady track of growth, communication, and quite honestly, having a happy marriage.
Absolutely.
Very good.
So then we're going to avoid power statements. You know, I taught one of the biggest ones that I hear couples tell me all the time is divorce. If you keep doing that, I'm going to divorce you. Or if you don't buy me the house that I want, I'm going to divorce you. If you don't, and I literally have know a couple that the spouse said that so many times till they eventually just said, you know what? I can't even relax in my marriage. I don't know, you're hanging divorce over my head. At any moment you can just come in and say that. So they just went ahead and divorced.
Wow.
Yeah, they went in. It's really sad that happened. But, you have to avoid those power statements. Don't do things. And to me, that's kind of bullying. And nobody wants to be bullied.
Absolutely.
Nobody wants to feel like, that you're holding something over my head. What kind of marriage would that be? And why would I want you to be so nervous that at any, that just wouldn't even be a relaxing, refreshing marriage.
Exactly.
You'll be nervous all the time, never know what you're doing, where you are. That kind of stress is not even fair to anybody. And then don't confront when you're angry. We talked about the tone. We talked about, just making sure you have, the right times. Don't confront anybody. Anger, it never helps the situation.
Very good.
It never helps the situation. It only, again, like you said earlier, it only makes either the person is going to withdraw or they're going to be combative. That's the only two things that's going to happen. Right. So, and then don't use the silent treatment. The silent treatment, and I know in our marriage, I know we've had, and I don't know if I would call mine silent treatment, but sometimes I just have to pull away. But I think silent treatment is when you just don't say anything for days. I've heard people say that they see who can go the longest without saying anything to each other. Who's going to give in first?
Well, again, that is the greatest. That is not the greatest, but it's one of the greatest indicators of immaturity, because it is the perfect picture of a little kid on the playground that says, "I'm not your friend. I'm not your friend. I'm not gonna play with you." That's immature. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Okay, and then control your hands and tongue. Listen, you don't have to talk to people any kind of way, but I am here to say, you don't put your hands on anybody. You can't control people like that. And if anybody is ever in that situation, get out of that situation. That is not a healthy situation. We do not condone any violence or abuse. Ever. Ever. And now this is always a good one. Don't compare your mate to others. When people say, well, so and so bought their wife, or so and so did this for their husband. That is so disrespectful. Now
Yes.
that is disrespectful simply because, or especially when you're doing it to make me feel bad about it.
Right.
Now, it's one thing because you and I, we talk about a lot of stuff and things that go on in the lives of my friends and things I may say, oh my God, look what this and this has happened. But it's not from a point of, because you don't do that.
Right.
Or to get you to feel bad about something or compare you to that person. Comparison breeds resentment.
Right. Absolutely.
At any time.
Absolutely. And you never want to use another person as motivator for your spouse's behavior. Use your love as a motivator for your spouse's behavior. Use your acknowledgement and your celebration, and use your behavior as a motivator for your spouse's behavior.
Right.
So wonderful. When you're wrong, admit it. We talked about this a little earlier. When you're wrong, just admit it. Just admit it. Don't drag in outsiders. I think this is key, that we don't want to bring outsiders into our marriage to try to referee us, unless it's a person we've agreed upon.
Exactly.
If this is a guide, a spiritual guide, an emotional guide, someone that we've agreed that we want to mentor or coach us, that's different. But I never want to start leaning into other people and start bringing other people in.
Careful.
Yeah, that becomes very, very dangerous. You also want to forgive your mate and don't hold resentment.
Right.
Forgive your mate and don't hold resentment. That's critical to marriages. A lot of times people are hesitant to forgive because they think forgiveness is forgetting.
Or releasing them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or they believe that forgiving is releasing them of the obligation and saying that I'm okay with what you did. Or they think that forgiveness is overlooking the drawback.
Right.
No. What forgiveness is, forgiveness gives me the opportunity to move past the issue.
Right.
And it also gives you the opportunity to grow, because one of the things that happens, forgiveness does not minimize the opportunity to confront.
Right.
Meaning, I'm going to let you know that this is an issue. I'm going to let you know that I didn't care for this, but I am willing to make the choice, because forgiveness is not a feeling, it's a choice. I'm willing to make the choice to move forward and move forward with our life. Now, I will give you forgiveness, but you have to earn trust.
Earn trust, right.
And so once I forgive you, you have the opportunity to make changes to earn my trust back. But I'm going to give you forgiveness because I don't want to be chained to that activity.
Right.
Then I want to make conflict resolution a regular habit. We've talked about this, that conflict resolution, communication is going to have to be a lifelong or marriage-long behavior. So we're not going to talk today and then we're done.
Right.
This is going to be how we're going to operate our marriage forever. As Kanye said, forever. These principles we're going to use forever, so that we can always overcome different challenges in our marriage.
Absolutely. Now, this is what we want you guys to do. We need you to pause this video, and we want you to get pencil, paper, pen, or use your cell phones, the notes on your cell phone, and we want you to list out any areas that you personally need to improve to be a better communicator. Not what your spouse needs to do, but what you need to do. So you guys take a few minutes, pause this and talk about it, and we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. Okay, hopefully you guys had a great conversation and had an opportunity to really reflect and do some emotional intelligence and figure out what areas you need to communicate in. So now you're going to ask your spouse to help you be accountable, or to help keep you accountable to all of those things that you said you're going to change as far as how you communicate.
It's going to be a great tool that you can, in essence, deputize your spouse to help you grow.
Yes.
That you share your listings, and this is what I'm going to work on. I'm going to work on not walking. I'm going to work on scheduling time, and I'm giving you permission that if I get off track, you can point and you can look at the sheet and say, hey, this is what you say you're going to work on. You're off a little bit, and you're gonna deputize them to bring you back back on course, realign, and strategize. And you're both going to become better communicators in the coming days.
Absolutely.
Hey, congratulations. You have just completed session 1 of the Total Marriage Makeover. As we stated, communication may not have been taught early on, but it is something that we can learn and practice and master. And so we're grateful again that you've shared this space with us. And we just hope that the information you've gotten tonight, we know that as you implement it into your marriage, you're going to see turnaround, total makeover, and you'll be glad that you took the time to grow. Hey, looking forward to seeing you in session 2. It's just going to get better and better.